Hi, this is a PowerPoint video about the art of the American Revolution, 17 American Revolutions, 1754 to 1800. So we start off here around 1750, and please remember that back then most people lived near water. So you see them on the coast, and you see them clinging to the rivers, and you see the ethnic composition. They were mostly British, that is English and Scottish, but there were some Irish, some Dutch, some Swedes, some Germans. They were more diverse than the people back in England, and it's going to lead to a sense of separate identity, and it's one of the factors that's going to cause the American Revolution. That is, they were more diverse than England. Over here, you see a religious map. Most of them are Anglicans coming out of the Church of England, but up here in New England, you see a lot of them are congregational. That includes the Puritans and the Pilgrims. They don't want any organized church larger than the individual town or church congregation. But again, more religious diversity. In the 1730s, 40s, and 50s, you're going to get the first Great Awakening when they had these very passionate, dramatic, outdoor religious revivals. It's going to lead to groups like the Baptists and the Methodists. And again, in terms of religion and ethnicity, they're going to start to feel separate from England. And it's going to be one of the long term factors leading to the revolution. Here we are down in Williamsburg, Virginia. Remember, Virginia was the largest colony in terms of people, and this is the Royal Governor's Palace, built in that Georgian style of architecture named after King George. And that style of architecture featured brick, and everything was symmetrical. And this was basically the largest building in the 13 colonies for a long time. This is an aerial view, beautiful gardens out back. It's down in Williamsburg, Virginia. They were trying to be like the great palaces of Europe. So this is a bird's eye aerial view of the great palace of Blenheim in England. It's absolutely enormous. All right. And this is sort of a small scale colonial example. In 1759, we have the Battle of Quebec, where you see the British here. They sailed upriver very early in the morning. It was basically still nighttime, and they sneak their way up these steep cliffs. You can still see them today in Quebec. And they come out here on the plains, and they basically fight the French. And here's the city of Quebec. And it was a huge victory for the British. The British beat the French in the French Indian War. The French get kicked out of Canada, kicked out of North America, and Britain is left with huge war debts and war bills. So they start to tax the colonists more. And that's going to be a medium term cause that leads to the revolution. Here's a famous picture, the death of General Wolfe. This is the British general here. This painting's by Benjamin West. And you should notice, just from an artistic point of view, the light is focused on him, and he's in this dying position, much like the old Christian paintings showed Jesus dying. So, very much the same composition here. And by the way, the British wore red coats because that red dye was very cheap. So that's why the British soldiers wore red coats. Famous painting. Let's jump down to Boston. This is Faneuil Hall. Okay, you see that Georgian architecture again with brick and symmetry. And Peter Faneuil was a merchant and unfortunately was involved in the slave trade also. So there are currently debates whether or not we should rename Faneuil Hall. This was a huge building at the time, and you compare it to our office buildings and skyscrapers today, you see how larger our buildings are today. Anyway, at that time, this would have been arguably the largest building in Boston. So what happens here is you have the triangle trade, and New England is exporting ships and fur and lumber, and they're importing finished products from Europe and unfortunately slaves from Africa. And the ships would dock up here in Boston Harbor. This is right by the aquarium today. And they'd come up here and they'd unload their products in these warehouses. Okay. And then you kept walking up the street to the old State House. This is still there today. And this was the center of the British colonial government of Massachusetts Bay Colony. Okay. Again, you see the Georgian architecture named after King George, made of brick, very symmetrical. By the way, it is from this balcony where that the Declaration of Independence was read for the first time to the people of Boston in 1776. And it is this intersection right here where the Boston Massacre happened. And that was in 1770. And there's a plaque on the ground. Okay, so you can see all this today. This is where you'd go to pay your import taxes as you unloaded your ships. One of the Patriot leaders is Sam Adams. Okay, he was a early radical. He is ready now, very early on, to break with England. All right, and this is a famous portrait by John Singleton Copley. And by the way, another just piece of art history. In those days, the painter would paint the famous person live, and then the painter would go back to his studio and he and his assistants would finish the rest of the painting. And you see here that the face doesn't quite fit the body. The proportions are a little bit off because, again, the face was painted live when busy Sam Adams had time to sit for a portrait. And then the painter would go back to his studio and finish it. But also, Sam Adams was a pretty ugly looking guy and wore some pretty basic clothes. So, this could be accurate. Here's another famous American painting. It's by John Singleton Copley. Copley Square is named after him. And this is Paul Revere. And what's interesting about this painting is two things. First, Paul Revere is not wearing a fancy outer coat. If you look here, this is a typical portrait. The man is wearing a fancy outer coat. It's very formal, and he's ready to have his painting done so he can be, captured and remembered forever. But here, Copley is without his coat. He's portrayed here as a craftsman, as a worker. And actually, when the painting was done, Revere's family did not like it because they said, this is too casual. And you're showing Paul Revere as a worker, as a middle-class guy, and not as a fancy, successful business person. We today consider it a very famous painting. Again, not your usual portrait of a fancy gentleman. It's a portrait of a craftsman in his work clothes. And he's wondering what to do. What should he do with this silver pot? How should he decorate it? And again, Paul Revere was a silversmith and a goldsmith. And we believe that more largely he was thinking, what do we do about the British? Should we break away? Should we go for independence? So perhaps he's thinking here not just about the pot and his job, but maybe he's thinking about the country and the future of America. That's 1768. Let's jump 2 years, and this is the Paul Revere's engraving of the Boston Massacre, which is in 1770. And this is basically a piece of propaganda. Okay, so here you have the British firing on the colonists who seem totally innocent, when in real life we have documents that say the colonists were throwing rocks, ice, garbage, bottles, that sort of thing. So maybe the British were acting in self-defense, but here it really looks like a massacre, the armed British firing at the undefended colonists. And again, there you see the State House in the background. There it is in real life. Okay, and there it is. So this is a piece of propaganda done by Paul Revere to anger the colonists. If we jump about 5 years, we get to the battles of Lexington and Concord, where the British are going out into the suburbs of Concord and Lexington, and they're trying to confiscate guns and gunpowder because they know violence is coming. They're trying to arrest Sam Adams and John Hancock, the Massachusetts rebel leaders, and Paul Revere and two other people ride out in the night of April 17th, April 18th, 1775. And Paul Revere famously says, the British are coming, the British are coming. This is a much later painting done in the 1930s by Grant Wood. You see it's very stylized, right? The road looks kind of perfect. The trees here are kind of perfect. The buildings have been reduced to geometric forms and shapes. So this is kind of stylized and unrealistic. But I just love the lights. You see the lights coming on here, people in the doorway, they've been alerted. And over here, you see these lights are still dark. These people are still asleep. So notice as Paul Revere spreads the news, there's light spreading. And up here, he hasn't been there yet. He hasn't delivered the warning, so it's still in darkness. Famous American painting. This is another one done much, much later. This is the 1950s by a famous African-American painter I love named Jacob Lawrence. And it's another version of Paul Revere's Ride. Here you see Paul Revere on a horse. He's pulling back on the white reins. And there's Paul Revere turned. His face is turned and he's whispering to the sky. You can see the whites of his eyes. So kind of dramatic here. These gestures, these black cloaks, and turning and whispering, and the horse here gasping for air and the bulging eyes, and the people here armed to the teeth, grabbing their swords and rifles and whatever weapons they can. Kind of dramatic. So then that morning, you get the quote unquote Battle of Lexington. It's very early, it's about 5 in the morning. And here you see a painting of it from that age, 1775. And again, the British soldiers here, the redcoats, because red was the cheapest colored dye, the redcoats are firing here basically on a bunch of farmers. It really wasn't a battle, it was more of a massacre, okay? And it looks like the redcoats are shooting the farmers in the back, which of course is immoral and illegal, okay? About 100 years later, you get this version, this painting, done in the 1880s. By this point, America's a huge, strong economic power with John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie and the robber barons. And so this version, right, shows the Americans fighting back as equals with guns, right, standing toe to toe and firing at the British. This is probably more accurate. Okay, the British had more people, more troops, more weapons, and were professional soldiers. And here you see a bunch of farmers, okay, just running away. So really, what this one shows is 100 years later, America's a much stronger, more confident country, but this is probably less accurate version. Okay, that same morning, what is it, April 18th, 1775, the British continue on to Concord, and the Americans lost at Lexington, but they conquered at Concord, and the fighting is here at the Old North Bridge. There's now a monument to it, okay, and I took my young children there back in 2015, and you can see a reenactment here with the British redcoats, all right, and here my two sons, let's see, this is Eli and this is Kai, with some reenactors here. This starts the myth of the Minuteman. Basically, here was a regular farmer, Farmer Fred, and this is his plow. But when duty called, he grabbed his gun out of the corner of his cabin and rushed off to fight for freedom. That is really a myth. Most of the soldiers in the Revolution were trained soldiers, trained by George Washington. It's only really at Lexington and Concord that these farmers are just kind of grabbing their guns and running into battle. Very famous painting by Daniel Chester Finch, who does the Lincoln statue and the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Okay. Anyway, here's the victory at the Old North Bridge, and here's my kids. You see Kai yawning because I took him there at about 7 a.m. on April 2015 to show him that. Even after blood was shed and the battles of Lexington and Concord, still the colonists wanted to make up. They wanted to stay British because they had a lot of privileges and rights. Right to taxation with representation, which came from the 1215 Magna Carta, right to trial by jury, freedom of assembly, some local elections. The English colonists had more rights than the French and the Spanish, and they had the protection of the British Navy, which was the best in the world and protected their cargo ships full of rice and indigo and tobacco. So the Continental Congress sent the Olive Branch petition. You see right here, John Hancock, and he's asking for peace. Let's make up. Okay, so they sent this to the English government. And King George III says no. He's worried that this is going to set a bad precedent, a bad example. He's worried if he lets the colonists go, then the rest of the British Empire will fall apart. And King George III did not want to let that happen because he's coming off a huge victory over France in the 7 Years' War. So King George III responded very harshly. He hires these German mercenaries, these Hessians, to go and shoot at his subjects in the colonies. By January 1776, the next year, Thomas Paine writes Common Sense, a short pamphlet saying it is common sense that we should break away and be independent. It's common sense because England is small. It's common sense because England is far away. It's common sense because a monarchy does not make sense. No king, no person should rule another. And if we break away, other countries will help us. And of course, everyone's talking about getting French help. Common Sense was written in a very plain style, so lots of farmers could understand it. And it's one of the reasons why 6 months later in Philadelphia, we call for independence. So the Continental Congress was meeting here in Independence Hall. This was the headquarters of the Pennsylvania colonial government. And again, you can see how today our modern office buildings are so much larger. And again, you see that Georgian architecture with the brick and the symmetry. This is Independence Hall. This is where the founding fathers met and voted and discussed and wrote these incredibly important documents. I took my kids there a couple years ago. Here's Eli, Kai, and Mai, and I arranged the documents in chronological order. This is the Declaration of Independence, 1776. This is the Constitution, 1787, and the Bill of Rights a couple years later to please the anti-federalists who were worried that the central government would be too strong. Abigail Adams wrote to her husband, John, who left Quincy, left Braintree, and went down to Philly. She says, remember the ladies. Remember the ladies. Give ladies rights. Give ladies the right to vote. Okay? And the women knew that power corrupts. And the men knew it too. They saw that happening with the British government. And again, these founding fathers did not trust power. They believed that power corrupted. So power needed to be limited and power needed to be broken up. You cannot give one person, the king or queen, all the power. They'll become a mean dictator or tyrant. By the way, this is the Adams house in Braintree, a childhood home, so you can see that. We get the Battle of Bunker Hill. Actually, it happened on Breed's Hill. Okay, and here are my kids at the monument. And the British come up the hill. Stupidly, they attacked uphill, and the colonists waited till they were up close. Remember the famous order, don't fire till you see the whites of their eyes. Don't fire till they get up close. It was smart. That was a smart order because the muskets in those days did not fire straight, and the Americans, the colonists, did not have a lot of ammunition. The colonists eventually ran out of ammunition. The British took the hill, but it was a very costly, deadly victory for them. So they went back to their ships in Boston Harbor and just stayed on their ships. And here you see my kids with some reenactors here. Okay, so now we're in Philadelphia. It's July 1776, and the colonists have decided to break. Virginia has called for independence because Lord Dunmore promised slavery to the slaves who sided with Britain, and he attacked the port. And so that brings in Virginia, and Pennsylvania also now wants independence, and they join Massachusetts. And here you see a famous painting of the Declaration. Here's Thomas Jefferson. Okay, he was tall, he was a redhead, he had a bit of a stutter, not a great speaker, but he was a great writer. And Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin and three others formed a committee of five, and they wrote the Declaration of Independence, but really it's written by Jefferson. If you've ever seen a $2 bill, the $2 bill copies this famous painting by John Trumbull, and the painting is in the Capitol Rotunda. All right, so now we're in 1776. The second half, we have called for independence. Back in July, the Declaration of Independence is announced, and we call for independence. And basically what happens is George Washington gets his butt kicked. The British come down to New York. That's the next big fight, is the Battle of New York, and George Washington loses. And he's almost surrounded here at the Battle of Brooklyn. Thank God, from an American standpoint, there was a really bad August summer thunderstorm, which lets George Washington get his troops across to Manhattan. They retreat back up to about Columbia and Harlem. They retreat over to New Jersey, and they're just getting their butts kicked, and they retreat back down through New Jersey, okay? And Thomas Paine writes another pamphlet called The Crisis, and he says, these are the times that try men's souls. But basically, the colonists are getting their butt kicked, and George Washington is losing. Until December. Okay, it's Christmas night, and he crosses the Delaware December 25th because a couple days later he knows on January 1st he's going to lose a lot of troops because their terms of enlistment are going to be up. And this is the famous painting. It's in New York City, and it commemorates Washington crossing the Delaware. It's totally inaccurate. First of all, it's the middle of the night; there wouldn't be that much light. Second of all, these icebergs make it look like the North Pole. There wouldn't be that much ice on the Delaware River. And if George Washington were standing up this much, he'd fall over. So, famous American painting, but not realistic. This is another version of it by that African American painter whom I love, Jacob Lawrence. And this is more realistic, even though it's very stylized. You see the waves look like mountains. Look how sharp the bayonet steel is at the tips of the muskets. But it's more realistic because it would have been cold and wet. It's a December night crossing. And they're all huddled down low in the boat so they don't fall over and they don't get wet. So it's actually more realistic. Okay, and maybe some little traces of blood on the side. So he crosses over, he surprises the Hessians in New Jersey and pulls off these huge victories. It's a big morale boost for the colonists who had been losing. And here is a famous painting by Charles Wilson Peale. It's George Washington commemorating his victory in Princeton, New Jersey. He's got his hand on the cannon because the cannon helped them win that day. And this is actually a more accurate picture of Washington in midlife. He was tall, he had small head, okay, and big hands and big feet and kind of pear shaped. Okay, so a lot of experts say this is a really accurate version of young George Washington. We jump to Valley Forge. The troops spent a very cold winter in Valley Forge. A lot of them died. They didn't have a lot of food. They didn't have a lot of clothing. It's very cold. Okay. But von Steuben, the Prussian general, comes over from Europe and he trains the troops. So they emerged from that winter at Valley Forge outside Philadelphia. They emerged a much tougher, more disciplined fighting force. I've taken my kids here. This is my mom. And this is the building where George Washington had his headquarters. So George Washington was here. This is his bedroom. This is his desk. And George Washington and his right hand man, Hamilton, were in this building running the army. Let's jump to 1777. Remember, the British strategy was to control this Hudson River, control this waterway, basically. The Brits have Canada because they won the Battle of Quebec. So the Brits control Canada. They want to control Lake Champlain. They want to control the Hudson River down to New York City. They just beat George Washington in New York City. They want to control these waterways. Why? To isolate New England. The British believe it's only New England, really, it's Massachusetts that wants to break away, and it makes sense to try to control those waterways. This is a physical map of New England, and you can see here the Berkshire Mountains and the Green Mountains and the White Mountains, where maybe some of you have gone skiing or snowboarding. And then there is this valley right here, and then you get the Adirondack Mountains in New York State, where I went to sleepaway camp when I was a teenager. Anyway, this is the Low River Valley. So it makes physical sense, it makes military sense that they're trying to cut off New England. This is what it looks like. Okay, so really hard to march your troops east and west across these steep mountains. So the British are trying to control this waterway. That was their military strategy. Here it is one more time: control this low river valley, cut off rebellious New England, and win this war. So that brings us in the middle of 1777 to the Battle of Saratoga. The British General Burgoyne's going to push down from Canada. The British General St. Leger is going to push over from what's now Buffalo. General Howe was supposed to push up from New York City, and they were going to control that river valley in New York and win the war. But it didn't work out that way. General Howe decided to go south instead, and Benedict Arnold and Gates are the heroes. We win the Battle of Saratoga, which convinces the French to help us, and the French were absolutely essential. It is thanks to the French that we won at Yorktown. Okay, I took my kids here a couple years ago, and here's our son Eli taking my mom, his grandma, hostage here. These are the trenches here from Yorktown. Anyway, the French Navy blockaded the coast, and the French and George Washington surround the British on land. So General Cornwallis is surrounded, and he surrenders on this meadow right here. I've taken my kids. So that is literally the meadow where the British surrendered to the Americans, and the underdog won. Then we made some new governments, the Articles of Confederation Congress. It was too weak. It couldn't tax. It had no executive branch to enforce. It couldn't regulate interstate commerce, and it's got no military. It can't put down Shays' Rebellion in Western Massachusetts. So 55 delegates met in the summer of 1787, back in Independence Hall, back in that same room, and they're going to redo the Articles of Confederation, which was too weak, and they make it stronger. James Madison was really the driving force, but George Washington presided over the meeting because he was tall, he was dignified, he was the victorious general from the Revolution. But James Madison is 36, and he's really the power. Please remember the Constitution is a bunch of compromises. The big states and the small states agreed on representation. The northern states and southern states agreed on slavery. Tragically and unfortunately, they let slavery continue. And they said in 20 years, we'll stop bringing in slaves, we'll stop importing slaves. So that was one compromise. They agreed to tax imports, which are products coming in from another country, and they did not tax exports, which are products we send to other countries. Taxing the imports was good for New England and the North. It made imports expensive, so people would buy American products. And not taxing exports was good for the South. The South exported a lot of cash crops like indigo, tobacco, and rice. So here you have two compromises: the slave trade compromise, you have the tax compromise, you also have the representation compromise. That's three. So here it is again: the small states, like the New Jersey plan, where every state would have equal representation. The big states, like the Virginia plan, where representation would be based on the number of people in your state. So they reached what is called the Great Compromise. We have a Congress with two chambers, right? In the Senate, it's like the New Jersey plan. Everybody, big and small states, gets two senators. And in the House of Representatives, it's like the Virginia plan, where representation is based on the number of people in your state. They also compromised about slavery and reached the three-fifths compromise. The southern states wanted slaves to count in order to increase the population, in order to increase their representation in the House of Representatives. The northern states that said that's not fair, that's going to give you a lot of representatives, and you're going to have too much political power. So they reach what is called the three-fifths compromise, where each slave counted as three-fifths of a person. Sadly, tragically, awfully, each slave counted as three-fifths of a person when it came to determining representation in the House of Representatives. Remember, this is not voting. The slaves could not vote. The delegates also compromised about power. The Federalists want a strong central government, and the Anti-Federalists do not. The Anti-Federalists worry that they're going to be pushed around and bullied the way the British pushed them around. So they basically compromise, and James Madison says, okay, I'll write a Bill of Rights, and that will limit government power. And the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments, the first 10 changes. First Amendment, freedom of speech, press, religion, assembly, and petition. Second Amendment, right to bear arms. Third Amendment, you do not have to house soldiers in your house. Fourth Amendment, no unreasonable search and seizure. You have a right to privacy. Fifth Amendment, you don't have to testify against yourself, and there's due process. You're entitled to fair treatment. Sixth Amendment, you're entitled to a speedy, fair trial by your peers. Eighth Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishment. And the ninth and 10th say you guys have other rights. You states and the people have other rights beyond those listed in the Constitution. Here it is. This is the Constitution. It's short. Okay. Article 1 sets up the Congress. They control the money. They start the laws. And Article 2 sets up the executive branch. Okay. With the commander in chief, he or she runs the war, but it's up to Congress to start the war. So you see how power is split up. And Article 3 sets up the courts. So it's pretty short and it's flexible. You can make changes. Please remember the founding fathers did a separation of powers because they suspected power. They didn't trust power. They believed that power ruins people. So they separated power and broke it up. The legislative branch, that is Congress, the Senate and the House, they make the laws. The executive branch, run by the president, they enforce the laws. And the judicial branch, those are the courts, they interpret the laws and solve disputes. Here's a legislative branch. This is the Congress in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Congress is made up of two parts. This is the House of Representatives, where your representation depends on the number of people in each state. That's like the Virginia plan favoring the big states. And then you also have the Senate, which favors the small states. Everybody's got two senators, just like the New Jersey plan. A block or two away, here's the Supreme Court with the 9 justices. By the way, here you see this is Greco-Roman architecture, like ancient Greece and ancient Rome, not Georgian. Here again, you see kind of Greco-Roman columns like ancient Greece, domes like Rome. So we're going back here to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. This is not Georgian architecture because we're trying not to be like Britain. And here's your Supreme Court. Here's your executive branch, right? The president is in the White House. The Constitution also set up checks and balances, okay? For example, Congress controls the money, all right? And they propose bills to the president. The president can veto that and cancel that. But the Congress can vote again and override that. That's one. So Congress proposes the bills, president can veto it, but Congress can override it. The president, here's another example, the president picks Supreme Court justices, but the Senate has got to sign off and approve of them. Also, the courts have got some powers too. The courts can cancel a law. Okay, they can say it's unconstitutional, it's illegal, and they can cancel a law. So the courts can check Congress, but again, the Senate has got to approve any of the Supreme Court justices. So there are checks and balances. There's also federalism. In other words, power is separated. Some of it's with the central government, now in Washington, D.C., and some of it's with the states. For example, the federal government declares war and establishes foreign policy and deals with Germany and Italy and China and Russia. It's only the federal government that coins money. On the other hand, the states run the schools, the states run the elections, and both of them can raise taxes. We pay national federal taxes and we pay state taxes. We have state courts and federal courts. Okay, we have state roads and federal roads like I-95. So there are federal powers, national powers over here on the left, there's state powers on the right, and there are also shared powers. The government also made amendments. Okay, the Bill of Rights, here they are. I got a little cartoon for you here, so you can pause it here if you want to go over those. On the other hand, the Constitution was not perfect. It did not let whom vote, it didn't let women vote, and it did not stop slavery. So it made progress. It was stronger than the weaker Articles of Confederation, but it was not perfect. I go back to my theme in American history. We're making progress, but not perfection. The first president was George Washington. This is a famous painting by Gilbert Stuart. He did a whole bunch of them. This is Washington as older and more serious. He had serious dental problems and was in pain a lot of the time, and smiling would be seen as not dignified. And it is this famous Athenaeum portrait that's the basis of your $1 bill. Okay, again, painting done by Gilbert Stuart. George Washington's in dental pain, and you see that at your $1 bill. This is another very famous painting of George Washington, making him seem like a Roman speaker or orator, a literal and figurative pillar of the community with the pillar in back. And the quill here as if George Washington was a great writer. He wasn't. Hamilton did his writing. This is another very famous painting of George Washington, done in a very Roman style. It's almost like a Roman funeral portrait. And down here it says Patria Pater, which means, you guys know from your Latin classes, father of our country. So making him seem almost like a Roman god. His right-hand man was Alexander Hamilton, born illegitimate in the Caribbean, goes to Columbia, becomes a young artillery officer, George Washington recognizes his talents. He becomes Washington's right-hand man, and George Alexander Hamilton becomes the Secretary of the Treasury. And why is he so important? Because I've got it right here, and you can pause that if you want to look at that. But basically, here's another picture of Hamilton. Evidently, he had very sloping shoulders. Anyway, why is Hamilton important? Hamilton says we need a strong government and we've got to get on good, firm, sound financial footing. He said we've got to pay back our debts from the American Revolution. We got to pay them back, all of it. We got to pay back 100% of our debts. How are we going to do that? We're going to tax whiskey, which is going to bring in money and get people to drink less. And we're going to tax imports. And that's going to encourage people to buy American products and not products from England. And we're able to pay back our debt. And so America was able to borrow. And it's thanks to Alexander Hamilton that we were in good financial health. Here he is again. James Madison was a Federalist like Hamilton. They wanted a strong central government, and Madison and Hamilton write the Federalist Papers. And then Madison is going to switch sides, okay, really over the Bank of the United States. Hamilton says we should be allowed to make a bank because the Elastic Clause, Congress can make all laws it considers necessary and proper. Thomas Jefferson and James Madison says no. You should not do a loose interpretation of the Constitution. You should do a strict interpretation of the Constitution. And so James Madison switches over and joins his fellow Virginian, Thomas Jefferson, and they start the Democratic Republican Party, which doesn't exist anymore, and they want strong states' rights. Don't forget about John Jay. He's a very famous lawyer out of New York. He writes the Federalist Essays with Hamilton, Madison, saying you Americans should ratify or approve the Constitution because we need a stronger government. And John Jay became the first Supreme Court justice, the head of the Supreme Court, okay? And here he's dressed like a lawyer with his law book and in a judge's robes. Then we get John Adams. And John Adams was really incredible. He's from Quincy or Braintree. He's a lawyer. And he's basically running the Continental Congresses. And it was his idea to have George Washington be the head general. It's his idea to have Thomas Jefferson write the Declaration of Independence. Why? He wants to bring along Virginia and make sure Virginia feels like its voices are heard, its leaders are represented. And that way Virginia will join Massachusetts in rebelling. He is George Washington's vice president. In that role, he did absolutely nothing, and he's elected the second president of the United States. France then captures our ships in the Caribbean. Americans call for war. They're also upset about the XYZ affair when France demanded bribes for diplomats X, Y, and Z. America says no, they want bribes. They're taking our ships. Let's go to war. And John Adams says no, we're a small, new, young, weak, poor country. We can't afford another war. And he passes the Alien and Sedition Acts. The Sedition Acts basically say, shut up, stop complaining, don't say anything bad about the government. And they were basically a violation of our First Amendment right to free speech. They're unpopular, so he loses the election of 1800. And in 1800, Jefferson is elected, and so power shifts from the Federalist Party to the Democratic Republican Party. You get a peaceful transfer of power, peaceful, and no wars, and the country is off and running. Last slides, just a little bit more architecture for you. This is the Massachusetts State House on Beacon Hill. Again, you see it's kind of Georgian because it's brick and symmetrical. It's kind of Greek because the columns and the Greek triangular pediment, and it's kind of Roman because of the dome. So you see those influences on the United States of America, ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and England. You can see those influences in our architecture. It's downtown on Beacon Hill. You should check it out. This is also downtown, right by MGH. This is the Harrison Gray Otis House. You should know by now what kind of architecture this is. This is Georgian architecture. It's actually now federal. We're kind of branching away from Georgian because now we're an independent country, okay, but still brick, still symmetrical. But you see here a little bit of Greek and Roman influence with the pillars creeping in. That's our federal style, okay? This is inside. Sorry, I know it's a little out of focus. Okay, and Harrison Gray Otis is related to Mary Otis Warren, okay? She's the aunt of Harrison Gray Otis, and she was a woman in Boston corresponding with all the founding fathers. She's a writer, she's a poet, and she wrote the first history of the American Revolution. So let's not forget about the ladies. And you see here, even though we're American, she's trying to appear like a rich European lady here. I hope you enjoyed the PowerPoint. I hope it helps you review. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.